Hello everyone and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tiger Hazel and of course I am joined by the international man of mystery, Aaron Buehner, and today we're here to talk about Nintendo's 2022. We have been reviewing their years in review for the last few years, and here we are to talk about a much more complete year than I would say the last few have been, and give our thoughts on all the games that they've put out, what our feeling is overall, maybe do a little bit of light comparison to these past years. And Aaron, thank you for joining me. It's been a long time since you and I recorded a video together. You were hopping countries. You were running from the police. I don't even know what you were doing. You were fleeing.
I was
it was scary. It was sad. We were worried for you.
I was beat-bopping. I was scatting, but then I look at the news and I'm saying things not going great in the U.S. I got to intervene. So I had to come back to the U.S. I had to take care of business. I had to sit down with you in what appears to be a storage closet, but is actually a room in my house, to sit down with you, Tucker, and talk about Pokemon. Now, here's where it's going to get really fucking crazy, right?
And other things.
Yeah. It's going to get crazy, because I don't have my ring light with me right now. And that sun is setting, so I'm going to be a shroud of darkness at a certain point.
The sun is setting? It's noon.
It's setting.
What are you talking about?
The sun is setting.
Do you know how time works?
And just as the sun is setting in Maine, the sun is setting on the year 2022. And Nintendo did a lot of things in 2022, and we did a lot of things in 2022, and you did a lot of things in 2022. So talk to us about all those things in the Discord. Link is the usual down in the description. Like the video.
Man after my own heart. Channel. Doing
Again,
YouTube plugs.
What did I say? I had to come back to the US and intervene, right? So there we go.
Yeah.
There's the plugs. It's fucking getting dark. I don't know what to tell you.
Do they have lights in Maine? Is there a way for you to light yourself?
I think that maybe I should get a candle. I'll do videos by candlelight. That'd be funny. Okay, Tucker.
That's gonna be BLB's mantra in 2022. We're gonna do everything analog.
Yeah. Come back to me. We're fun it later. Come back to me. I'm cooking up a good riff. We'll circle back to it at the end of the video.
That's fine. Don't worry.
You sent me a bunch of really, really interesting things, as you usually do. The most recent interesting thing you sent me was a list of every game Nintendo published this year in 2022.
True.
But before I even
I think one of those is not a published game, because they didn't publish Sparks of Hope, but also, like, fuck you. Like,
they publish it in Japan.
That's a part of their year. Oh, so they do. They do publish it.
True fact.
People.
Here's my question for you, Tucker. As we get back into the flow of things, as we talk about Nintendo as it exists, before we get to the list of games, before we get to any events, before we get to any personal anecdotes and feelings or lies you want to tell over here, high level, what was your feeling about Nintendo's 2022?
Nintendo's 2022 really started coming together in the second half of the year for me, because while I enjoyed a couple of the games starting off, it did feel a little bit unbalanced and sparse at first, as we'll talk a little bit about the cadence that they started releasing games. But as no, that already came out. That wasn't this year. Sorry. Neither was Chameleon Twist. I know you're thinking it.
I was.
But as we start getting into this holiday season, fall season, they started releasing a lot of big games that had been really anticipated. I mean, highly anticipated, and releasing basically on top of each other. And even though I didn't love every game they put out this year, I think in terms of consistently high bar of quality, them being lots of highly anticipated things, this was probably one of the best years Nintendo has ever had in terms of output, consistency in that output, and just a lot of these titles will stand as some of the best that not only Nintendo has made or of their series, but of this generation.
Yeah, so I'm looking at 12 published games. I personally let's find out. 1,
2, 3, 4.
2, 3, 4 of them.
I think it's 4. Yeah.
But if I operated purely through this subjective lens, which I'm going to do most of the time for this video, because I don't represent the majority.
No.
If I say purely subjectively, this year is about as good or as bad as any other year of Nintendo's history is. What happens every single year? Nintendo really has a whole slate of games. I say, man, doesn't that look exciting? And then I don't like most of them.
Yeah.
That's basically what happens every year.
Yes.
And so I come out the other side with a handful. I come out, like last year I had No More Heroes and WarioWare and Metroid Dread. I'm like, there we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A year before that, what was that? 2020?
Unholy Trinity.
Actually, I didn't like anything from 2020 other than close games. But the point is,
Yeah.
on the whole, I usually leave a modern Nintendo year, even going back to the Wii U era, the couple games that really speak to me and resonate with me. And for me, that's enough. So ultimately,
Yeah.
on a subjective level, I say 2022 for Nintendo hit the bar I was looking for.
Sure.
But I think I also, in fairness, have to say that this is maybe the strongest year that the Switch has had, period.
Yeah.
I think that it had a really remarkable breadth of titles, and even though
Mm.
I have pretty significant issues with most of the games on this list, I don't
Hmm.
represent the majority opinion on several of them. And so I
Yeah.
think it was quite remarkable seeing Nintendo pull together a diverse list in terms of genre and studio and things like that. And with this cadence,
Yeah.
I mean, we got to remember, Breath of the Wild was later of the year. Advance Wars, the most
Yeah.
interesting game Nintendo's publishing currently, other than Pikmin, they got later of the year. But even losing titles like that, even not getting things like Metroid Prime 4, which have been percolating for so long,
True.
we still got a game almost every month, with the exception, it looks like,
Yeah.
of February. And I guess December, but there's been plenty of shit to play in December anyway. So I think that it's been quite impressive looking at that game library, looking at the showcases they gave, looking at the financials that they've pulled in. I mean, I don't really
Yeah.
see a lot of angles that I can criticize Nintendo's 2022 from.
Yeah, and I think that's okay. I mean, we can talk a little bit about
Yeah.
our subjectivity or the problems we have about
Yeah.
a few of the games in specific. But when I think about a year overall, I do try at least to some degree divorce myself from okay, yeah, what I don't know, 2019 Jedi Fallen Order, like that game didn't hit for me
Game of the year.
personally, but I recognize it's one of the games that people like highly acclaim from that year, so I gotta account that in that. Like Death Stranding, yeah, okay, I didn't love that, but it's a Kojima game, so that really does boost up 2019. And when I'm looking at this year, I think I'm almost the opposite of you. There are a handful of games here that I didn't play.
Yeah.
Actually, a handful being that I didn't play Sparks of Hope or Triangle Strategy. The two
Oh my god.
least connected to Nintendo games here.
Well, one's a Mario game.
But well, yes. Um,
It's a good
but
game too, by the way.
I like basically every game here. And I do think that it can be pretty easily, like, maybe with a little bit of effort, contested that a lot of these games are some of the best of their series or best of the generation. And that's not something that you get from one console publisher very often in one year. You think about the PS4 and Sony, they had like one or maybe two big games each year that were some of the best of the generation. But when we're looking at this list and we've got two Pokemon titles, which we can certainly talk about, I think that's probably the biggest thing about this year,
Yeah.
that are absolutely mixed, and we can have a conversation about that, but did make Pokemon something new for basically the first time in its history, and Kirby the Forgotten Land making Kirby something new for the first time in its history, and returning to long lost franchises like Nintendo Blank Sports and the Mario Strikers series. It's really impressive the scale and breadth, as you were saying, of games that they put out this year.
Yeah, I think they did a nice job of sort of saying we got a lot of different audiences. What is the Nintendo audience? Well, it's a lot of things. Okay, so let's try to get something
Yeah.
for all of them, right? The JRPG fans, which make up a sadly make up a majority of Nintendo's player base. They got all the things they wanted. Nah, but I'm being facetious, of course.
Yeah.
But very impressive offerings there. I mean, as much as Xenoblade is just not really my thing, no matter how many times I try, it's basically
Yeah.
undeniable that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is one of the most remarkable games in the system, I think. And
Yeah.
it certainly,
Yeah.
other than X, is the one that interested me the most from the time I spent with it.
Sure.
But then you even had,
Yeah.
the Pokemon games that you're saying. Your casual goose eggs got the Nintendo Switch Sports and the Mario Strikers Battle Leagues, and while
Your Robert Toxmedias of the world.
your Robert Toxmedias who have some sort of condition where they play Nintendo Switch Sports every week, they got plenty of things to do.
Jesus Christ.
But I really am impressed in that respect. Nintendo, sometimes it feels like they're not always able to hit every little niche of their audience, and I think this year they did a really nice job of sharing the wealth, and I think that's part of the reason why
Yeah.
I am personally happy.
Sharing the joy.
Sharing the joy. To the cons of the world? I don't know.
Well, it depends on who's playing.
But I wanna hammer in what you're saying with this feeling of like evolution, because I think that's an interesting sort of through
Sure.
line to pull out of the year. Kirby, of course,
Yeah.
is a really interesting one because for me, if Nintendo had literally not had a single Nintendo Direct, not released a single game other than Kirby, if literally the entirety of their year was here's Kirby, shut the fuck up, goodbye, I would be over the
Yeah.
moon because I really, for me personally, for my taste, for what I want out of Nintendo, Kirby and the Forgotten Land is
Yeah.
one of my favorite Nintendo games of all time. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
to me, it really is sort of this.
Why don't we just start there?
Yeah, it's because it's a continuation almost of this idea that we've talked about in past years of the Switch era really evolving a lot of these franchises that needed that evolution.
Yeah.
And while I think they
Absolutely.
were definitely missed opportunities, like Mario Circus Battle League is basically charged, but lesser than in a lot of
Yes.
respects. I look at something
Well,
like
didn't they add Bowser Jr. recently?
Bowser Jr. Oh,
Last free update? Last update?
Oh, hush, you. They did do that though. But like for me, Forgotten Land was sort of an affirmation of everything the Switch era can be when it's at its best. So
yeah,
with a title like that in there, I think that we did a nice job of facing forward while also looking back for things like Strikers and Mario Sports and giving us more iteration upon what's really already been successful in Xenoblade. So I think we saw a very dynamic Nintendo this year.
Yeah, and Kirby is, again, is where I kind of want to start because, well, that's not the game that stuck with me the most from this year. It is one of the ones I'm most impressed by because we've had a number of conversations. I think probably one of the most frequent discussions we've had on this channel through specific reviews, through retrospective discussions, through our BLB discussions about the games we've been playing, is that Kirby is a series that a lot of people really like. It's obviously one of the iconic Nintendo franchises of all time. But for me, the stagnanticity of the series has been a huge blowback. I mean, I played Star Allies and I'm like, this is one of the most fine games I've ever played in my life. And some of the other Kirby games that I've played, I'm like, over 20 years of evolution and there's not a lot of change. And 3D Kirby, as I said in our live reaction to Forgotten Worlds reveal, 3D Kirby was always one of my dream games. I mean, I think back to like when I was just starting to get into video games and thinking about like, oh, what's the possibility? I wanted open world Pokemon, I wanted 3D Kirby, and I wanted Portal 3, which one of those we didn't get this year. Though they put ray tracing in Portal 1, and goddamn, that game looks great.
They put Portal 1 and 2 on Switch also, so I played Portal for the first time. That's a good game. Oh
yeah, you should get the 2.
Yeah,
that should be what I know. I know our New Year's resolutions never amount to fucking anything. But that's one you should put on there.
I can't wait.
But Kirby and the Forgotten Land is one of my it's easily my favorite Kirby game. And when we talked about it, you were sort of on the fence of like thinking about does this surpass Superstar or I guess Superstar Ultra for you? But for me, it's far and away the best that Kirby's been. And it's shown that while they have fun smaller ideas like a part-time UFO, that kind of creativity and stepping outside of their comfort zone can be applied to something like Kirby and frankly make one of the strongest games that team has ever made.
Yeah, it's just it's exciting to be surprised by Nintendo again because I think even a lot of the games on Switch that I love, something like Smash Ultimate is an amazing game, but I can't say that I was surprised by Smash Ultimate. You know what I mean?
Sure.
A lot of Nintendo's games, and this is something my friend Jonathan Holmes said, and I think it's really true. It's like Nintendo, by the time the Switch era's rolled itself out, they've realized that so many of their games fit into very particular boxes. Like we got the popular fighting game. We know what Smash Brothers is. We're going to release Smash Brothers because we know it has this market and it's going to find it and it's going to work. It's even the same with like Mario Sports and things like that. Mario Sports, or I guess Nintendo Switch Sports is what I meant to say, but it applies to both.
They're Nintendo sports games.
Yeah.
If only there was some sort of umbrella you could put Mario Sports and Nintendo Sports on. I don't it's too complicated. We'll figure that out later.
It's electronic sports. How about it's this sort of abbreviated to esports. But it's the sort of thing of like I know what to expect out of most Nintendo games, and I think that if you said what's the next Kirby game after Star Allies, I could have probably given you what I would expect the next Kirby game to look like. And I would have said with 90% certainty that's what it was going to be. But Star Allies was Nintendo's, or sorry, not Star Allies, Forgotten Land was Nintendo saying, well, what if we did something more? We kind of push that envelope further. And not just in the Xenoblade way of saying, let's do something grand and ambitious, but just bigger than the last grand and ambitious thing. It's Nintendo saying, what if we totally scrapped the formula and tried again and took what worked, salvaged good elements, completely threw a couple spanners into the works and just made something totally new. And I really, really appreciate that. And so for me, I still do think Superstar is the better game, or at least the game I prefer more.
Yeah, that's fair.
There's no doubt.
I mean, it's wrong, but it's fair.
Yeah, that's fair. There's no doubt that Forgotten Land is the most ambitious the series has basically ever been. And that they're able to pull it off with such a high degree of polish and execution on the first go-around has me not only so pleased that this game was that good, but has me so excited for what the next one could look like.
Don't even get me started. Jesus Christ.
You think about like Triple Deluxe.
Imagine if we start getting 3D Kirby games like every 2 to 3 years. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself.
Because you think about like Triple Deluxe. Triple Deluxe is a really good game. But Triple Deluxe is basically more of Return to Dreamland, right? But then they said, look, let's buckle up, right? We made Triple Deluxe. We know how the 3DS works now. We're in it. Then they make Robobot. And Robobot is a very, very, very good game. And it is night and day over Triple Deluxe.
I like that game a lot.
And I think Triple Deluxe is a good game. So my point being, the framework here is so strong that sequel, I think, is just going to be dynamite. So I love Forgotten.
Absolutely. Yeah. And another place that we can sort of draw this tangent of, in a much smaller degree, but reinvention and trying something at least somewhat new, is and you might push back against this a little bit, but I would draw that tangent to Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes, because that game surprised me, not only because I hadn't really gotten into a Warriors game, which of course we've talked about on here, that it didn't quite hit home for you, but for Christ, what's the team? Is that Team Ninja?
No, it's
Koei Omega Force
and Omega Force.
Omega Force. Omega Force showing that they can frankly do writing and characters and have external progression out of their combat, which they've been refining for basically our entire lifetimes, is why 3 Hopes for me is one of the Switch's best games. It is showing that this can be a continuation of an established world, which we've seen with Persona 5 Strikers and Age of Calamity, but this time around, actually I haven't played Persona 5 Strikers, I don't know how much story is in that game, but at least for the Nintendo games, well, no one plays Persona. I know they've got some hardcore fans. I know Japan was inspired by it or whatever, but Fire Emblem is where it counts. But the Nintendo ones, this is a pretty complete reinvention from what the first Fire Emblem Warriors was, or Hyrule Warriors, or even the depth that was gone into with, or lack of depth that was gone into with Age of Calamity. This is a much more well-realized package, and for me, that really helped me get into that kind of gameplay, because otherwise I'm not a gameplay first guy. I've always said that. It's one of our ongoing conversations here. But balancing it out with character writing and progression in the quote-unquote overworld, that really sold this game for me. And it was a really fresh thing that I'm excited to see what kind of new elements that team tries in the future. If they try other things, who the fuck knows?
Yeah, I mean, as I said in our dedicated video to this topic, the game didn't really work for me, but it's sort of another example of how Omega Force is really good at just being a chameleon, really, in a lot of ways, and their ability to adapt styles and gameplay elements and everything from other studios and bring them to the Warriors games is quite interesting.
Yeah.
Even if I think I've kind of hit my upper limit for that same Warriors combat, being much more interested in the gameplay, opposed to the narrative. But yeah, I think that game is sort of interesting as an example of this sort of second tier of Nintendo titles that sort of backfilled the year, right? Because I think there's a good number of those. Pulling up this list again, you got things like that. You got things like Mario Battle League. You got things like even Bayonetta, right? These games that are targeted at smaller audiences. I think stuck the landing for the communities in the most part, right? You can Battle League is whatever to a lot of people, but Nintendo identified some niches that they should hit this year with their partners, and they hit them quite
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And, I mean, action fans are not wanting for good games on Switch between like Astral Chain and No More Heroes 3 and now Nier Automata, which is actually a really good port this year, and now Bayonetta. Like, people got what they wanted, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, right? But Bayonetta 3 for me, I fucking love Bayonetta 3. You should go watch our 90-minute review discussion about Bayonetta 3. It was really good.
For context, we recorded a full review and it just died. Who the hell knows where it went?
No one knows where it is.
Gone. It couldn't be uploaded. Like, I went to upload it, I'm like, I don't see it on my computer. I don't see it on Squadcast. I don't see it on the drive. It's just, who the hell knows? Which is sad, because frankly, I think it was one of the best discussions we had all year. Sorry to burst your bubble, guys, because you'll never see it. It only exists in our minds, but that is a game that is really interesting to me because it does somewhat continue this tangent of trying new things. I mean, Bayonetta 3 is the most ambitious that the Bayonetta series ever has been, and it's been a game that's been long awaited. It was announced, 7 months after the launch of the Switch at that E3, at the Game Awards, and basically hide nor hair of it until middle of last year, and it came out, and for its audience, it absolutely hit. But for me, it is kind of the low rule to the high rule of trying something new, and for me, not really working. A lot of the ambitious elements of that game that weren't what Bayonetta had been in the past, when they're trying new gameplay structures, they're introducing more puzzle elements. That, for me, is what took away from Bayonetta 3 and what made it not easily the best in the franchise. Because I do think that it looks better than the past games. I think it plays the same, if not a little bit better than the past games, but there were sections like the Beyond 2D platforming sections that were, I think, terribly designed and brought down the package overall in some of those puzzles. But I respect that they tried. Because they could have just played it really safe and made a better game, but at least they tried.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the, for me, I think a lot of those design decisions were more effective in my mind for my taste, but also it's just a general principle of I already have Bayonetta 2, you know what I mean? And so it's part of why I like Forgotten Lands so much. I already have a really good 2D Kirby, so I want to see them do something different. And Bayonetta 3 is not the sort of a radical change from Bayonetta 2 that Forgotten Land is to Star Allies, but it is still...
Cereza and the Lost Demon is.
Yes. It is enough of a sort of...
Which we'll be talking about next year.
Yeah, it's enough of a recontextualization and an evolution of Bayonetta to where it feels really fresh to me. So yeah, I love that. I love that game. I don't know how many of these other games I've got super in-depth thoughts about, other than a couple that we'll mention. Triangle Strategy I didn't play. Sorry, Square Enix.
No, neither did I.
I bought this though. Yeah. When you release 35 games a year, odds are I'm going to buy a couple.
You're bound to. To happen upon them. You're digging through the bushes. You're you got your machete. You're hacking through the jungle. It's oh, look at that, shining off in the distance. It's Harvestella. Or Various Daylife. That was another one, right? They put that game
Various
out.
Daylife. That's a Switch exclusive. Or no, it was on Apple Arcade. Sorry, and then it came to Switch.
Is that true?
Yes. Yeah, okay. I didn't play that. What do you want to say about...
What, Various Daylife? No, you're right, you didn't.
I also didn't play Triangle Strategy. Did you want to...
Various Daylife is on everything but Xbox.
Oh, I had no
idea.
Peculiar. If you put a gun to my head and ask me what platforms Various Daylife is on, I would say the road outside my house. That'd be my answer. That's where I find Various Daylife. What do you want to say to me about Xenoblade Chronicles 3? Because you, pervert... have not said anything about this game, I don't think, on any videos. I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that.
No, that's true, because I was playing it just after you and I you'd spent some time here. I was playing it at a time where, obviously you weren't playing it. Bo had already finished it. And then because I had to go to LA, I had to go to New York, I didn't finish that game. I played about half of it. And what I played, I loved. I didn't think it didn't hit me as hard as Xenoblade 2, though I didn't finish the game. And it wasn't until the end of Xenoblade 2 that I really super, super fell in love with that cast of characters. And I think there's certainly a chance that if I, God forbid, ever get back to
God
Xenoblade
forbid.
3 that it does surpass Xenoblade
Yeah.
2 in my mind. But what that game shows me, and it's not a surprise to anyone, but is that Monolith Soft is one of the most impressive developers working today. They put out Xenoblade 2. They helped with basically everything that Nintendo has done in the last 4 or 5 years. And then they just made another huge game with full voice acting and giant worlds and a campaign and a whole new set of lore that expands on what the previous games have established. And it looks better than almost anything else Nintendo has put out this year. And it's got the scope and the spectacle. And that was the Nintendo game nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. Like, that game is what I wish other people saw Xenoblade 2 as. Because as someone who loved Xenoblade 2, and it is one of my favorite games of all time, I'm so used to that game getting a lot of shit. I think that game is great, but everyone craps on that game, frankly.
Yeah.
But this game has reversed that and has put the Xenoblade franchise back into good graces and has made it bigger than ever. And I think that's really impressive in a lineup like this, that you can say pretty easily that Bayonetta 3 or Sparks of Hope or Splatoon 3 or Triangle Strategy could have been in that Game of the Year contending slot from the Nintendo system games, but it was Xenoblade 3 that people seem to have resonated with more personally than maybe any of these other games. And I think that's really remarkable.
Yeah, I think that there's really no counter argument to Monolith Soft being Nintendo's most valuable partner
asset,
in my opinion. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really make sense when you really boil it down. It doesn't make sense what they're doing.
Yeah,
and that it reminds me a lot of what Insomniac is doing for PlayStation. With Ratchet and Clank and Miles Morales and now Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine. Like, they are doing the most. Yeah. And so is Monolith. But Monolith, what even Insomniac isn't doing is they're going and saying, hey, let's make Zelda run right, and let's give you help with New Horizons and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So they are really such a pivotal, or let's say vital component of how Nintendo makes their games now. So for as much as I just by merit of the sort of game they make, it doesn't do a whole hell of a lot for me. It's still really important and exciting to see them be that big. And I would have given that Game of the Year nomination to a different game, probably. But
that's totally fair.
I'm glad that Xenoblade got, because I will say at least the art direction of the game is fucking banging. Beautiful game.
Jesus Christ, the soundtrack too.
I still think, the X I like just this much more because I just love the heavier sci-fi of X. I think is super cool. But then of the numbered titles, I definitely like the characters and world of 3 the best. So
absolutely.
If we keep trending this way, by the time we get to like Xenoblade 9 all the way over here, I might play through the whole game.
Wow, that would be really impressive.
Because my enjoyment of 1 is like, my enjoyment of 2 is like, my enjoyment of X is like, now my enjoyment of 3 is like, we'll just get all the way up to here, right? And then I'll like the whole game.
That'll be the day.
Maybe I'll just have liked JRPGs by that point in time. But
they'd seem to become more and more frequent for you. So in 10 years, you'll probably be as much of a JRPG fan as one Andrew Roscoe of my Star Wars Show fame.
I keep buying them. Them.
Yeah, you've got Kingdom Hearts 3 within arm reach, which is scary.
I always do. That's not true.
I always keep it on me, just in case.
Let me look at this list again for a second. I want to talk about Kirby's Dream Buffet for a moment.
Yes,
just for a moment.
Why not? Just for a moment.
Because Jean and I still play this game all the time.
Are you serious?
I don't really have a whole lot. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot I want to say about it, but we play the game quite frequently. I would say I don't want to tell tales out of school, so why don't I say weekly we play the game at least?
Sure.
I just think it's really cute and really fun, and all I really wanted to impress is that it was sort of an answer to a call that I had made. Yeah, not that anyone's listening to what I have to say on this front, but the idea that we should have more small-scale Nintendo titles on the eShop. Now, obviously, we've gotten a couple, like Stretchers and Good Job and things, but what I really wanted was that IP. Tie this IP to them, give us small little experimental things in this world. It's exactly what Dream Buffet is. So I just want to shout that out really quick. To me, one of the highlights of the year.
Yeah, no, and I think that's definitely fair. On a conceptual level, it's one of the it's one of the most exciting games of the year for me. I didn't love it like you do, but I really like that game. I think it's very good for what it is, and it does signal that Nintendo knows, or at least Hal knows, that there is a market for putting out a much smaller IP-connected digital exclusive game, and one with the same, texture work and musical polish and gameplay polish of any of their bigger games. Yeah, that game does look great.
It's fucking beautiful.
The little icing as you're rolling through it. Damn. But I do wish that it signals a very good direction. If they continue that way, who the hell knows? But for me, it does also signal maybe the downside of making a game like this. Is this game is interesting. It's unique for Kirby racing game, Kirby multiplayer game in this kind of more party game fashion. Although I guess they've what was the one on 3DS? Battle Royale? Yeah, there was Kirby Battle Royale on 3DS, and that went nowhere.
Yes.
But is that these digital titles, I still, even if they're only $20, even if they are smaller for the dev team, I would like them to be the, in my eyes, natural conclusion of their premise. And I do think that this game would have benefited and would stick around more in my mind and become a more perennial Nintendo classic, quote unquote, if it was a more fleshed out experience, if it did have more game modes, more maps, more options. As it stands, it's very good as a base, but and this is kind of what fueled our conversation when we reviewed the game. I do think that it's strong enough to have other things built on top of it, and the fact that it is kind of just a foundation is disappointing to me in that I feel like Hal got away with not the bare minimum, because this game is exceptional for a small game, but with not reaching the heights they certainly could have with their skill as a team and with the concept that they have come up with within this game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think ultimately for me, it's like, it's really great and I love it, but I don't love it more than the idea that Hal is currently now focusing on another 3D Kirby platform.
Yeah, of course.
And my feeling is like, I just don't think every game needs to be like, I don't think every game needs to take weeks of my life away from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, I want Hal to have an outlet to make a game like this, but I also want them to keep the eye on the prize, which is that next 3D Kirby game. And I think that's exactly what Dream Buffet did.
Yeah.
So not every game that Nintendo puts out, I think, needs to go down in history as a fixture of their history.
That's fair.
That's how I would put it. They had a target. They scaled to the target and they hit the bullseye.
Yeah.
It's just a smaller bullseye maybe than what the other.
Isn't that more impressive though? Smaller bullseye. So you want the bullseye to be smaller if you can hit it, because then you're a better marksman. Fucking Hawkeye out here.
Speaking of shooting things, Splatoon 3 came out this year.
Sure as hell did.
Splatoon 3 is a great game.
Is that what that sentence says?
And?
Well, here's the thing: is I think that Splatoon 3 is interesting because for Splatoon, it's kind of that tangent of possible reinvention, but also in comparison to something like the Pokemon games, which we'll still get to, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, as I said, to some extent, Bayonetta 3 and Fire Emblem Warriors. This is a much more direct continuation of, hey, we've got Splatoon 2, we've got Splatoon 1, we got Splatoon 2, we got Splatoon 3. It's an upward trend in terms of amount of content, but I do think what Splatoon 3 did best for me is show that these games can launch with a more complete feel. I mean, this game is as complete as Splatoon 2 was a year or a year and a half into its release of its content. And with the lots of quality of life updates that Splatoon 3 had, it makes it, like, I was playing it for a few hours and I'm like, yeah, this is the better game than Splatoon 2, pretty much categorically. And I think that that's really exciting to see a team grow and learn from what they've done in the past. The criticisms of Splatoon 1 and 2 launching with very little content, a lot of small quality of life things like, oh, well, why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? And make it feel a lot more modern. Frankly, I think Splatoon 3 is one of the most modern feeling Nintendo games that Nintendo has ever published, because it actually does online multiplayer well, and there's progression, and they like do the quality of life things that these other games never even really tried to have. And That's it's one of the best games on the Switch. I mean, it's not a game that I play all the time, but playing that story mode, which is so much better than the story modes they've done in the
Yeah.
past, and playing the game and feeling all those quality of life upgrades, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, it's a sensible progression, but from Nintendo, when you expect them to zag when you want them to zig, the fact that they zigged and it landed is really quite fun.
Yeah, it's I think it's sort of like a recognition that not every game needs to be some fucking Super Mario Odyssey-esque sequel wherein we're
Yeah.
throwing everything from the last game out and we're building something totally new.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can iterate. It's fine to do that when it's appropriate. And Splatoon is more about making a world that people return to and live in, and so the new version of that world should supersede the last one.
Yeah.
And so I think they made sort of the smart design decisions to make them most complete feeling Splatoon, best feeling Splatoon,
Mm-hmm.
that simultaneously is maybe not the most interesting Splatoon 3, but I think
Yeah.
it's a Splatoon 3 that's sort of purpose built in a way that's going to last. And we know we're going to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
new things for 2 years, be it paid expansions, be it new modes and the new catalogs and everything. So it's nice to sort of put another game into the library that we know has a shelf life.
Yeah. Of
You know,
course.
you get
That.
something
Yeah.
like a Battle League, and it's fine and it's okay and it's Strikers again, and then the promise becomes 3 character packs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not a game that really is going to be lighting up the imaginations of millions and millions of Switch players over and over
Mm-hmm.
again. But you know, this game is Splatoon 3 is, and so I'm excited to see it grow and change and gain new modes as a
Yeah. Yeah.
foundational point. I think it's really quite effective. I love the story mode, as you're saying. I
Mm-hmm.
think that everything just feels better.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting for that mode that pushes it above Splatoon 2 for
Of
me.
course. Yeah.
The way that Clam Blitz and Octo expansion sort of rolling on top of each other, or I guess
Mm-hmm.
a couple months apart sequentially, did to push Splatoon 2 over Splatoon 1. I think I'm
Mm.
still waiting for that for Splatoon 3.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
it's the sort of thing of like Splatoon as Splatoon is great. And so the
Yes.
newest version of Splatoon is automatically really good.
Yeah.
But
It
now I'm
is.
just waiting to see how are we going to differentiate it. And they've got a lot of time to do that. So
True.
it's a platform. It's growing. It's changing. It's evolving. I'm not comfortable right now saying that it's my favorite Splatoon game,
Mm-hmm.
but I am comfortable saying that this foundation is good enough to where I think in 6 months it probably will be.
Yeah.
So
That's
we'll see.
what I'm hoping for, that it pushes it over for you as well, because I as I said, I do think that this is the superior game, not only from a technical level, which I think you wouldn't disagree with, or those quality of life things, but Splatoon 2 is the one that I spent more time with, and I haven't really felt drawn
Yeah.
to get into Splatoon 3, not only because I'm less interested in multiplayer games than I was 4 or 5 years ago when I played
Yeah.
Splatoon 2, but that it hasn't had as consistent of a rollout of content as we frankly expected it to. It's so much slower than Splatoon 2 was, and that's the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause, is
Yeah.
how long after Splatoon 2 came out was Octo expansion?
Don't
Like
ask because I won't
a
know.
year and a half?
Oh, Octo
Something like
expansion I
that?
can tell you about. Octo
It
expansion
was
came out in July of 2019.
19? You...
Sorry, no, 2018. Sorry, I'm high on cocaine. It's 2018.
Yeah, okay, so that was about a
Because it was
year.
the summer I started Reddit for gaming trend. Yeah, it was about a year later.
Yeah. And I hope that the expansion is on that
Yeah.
track as well, but I also hope that there's something major in between that, because you're talking about Clan Blitz, a new mode for the multiplayer. Not having that in Splatoon 3 is peculiar from the base start. Of course, you can go play your fucking table turf tennis, whatever it's called. No one's going to do that. But I really do hope that they do, because the fact that they're not doing the drip feed as well as they have in the past is slightly worrisome. Maybe it means that they want it to exist over a longer period of time than the previous games had, which is possible. But also, we're getting to the point where maybe the new console is coming out in not next year, maybe not the year after that, but like, who knows how long it can last, given the quote unquote shelf life of the Switch and how late this is launched into this generation.
I mean, it sold 8 million copies in 3 days, so I don't think it's
Yeah.
really in jeopardy of slowing down. I mean, Splatoon 2 was millions of people were playing Splatoon 2 well after that last update came out, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really worried about it. I suppose we'll see how it shakes out. I mean, we know that single player expansion is coming. They have
Yeah.
been doing interesting events like the like the big run, which I missed because I was out in the UK. But the idea of like the Salmonids invading the regular maps and having to fight them there. I mean, they are doing cool stuff. I'm just interested what the next sort of the next permanent edition is going to be. So we'll
Of
see.
course. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess Pokemon's the last thing to talk about.
Well, quickly, I think we should just sort of talk about the two Switch sports games. We kind of pushed, or two Nintendo sports games, excuse me. We kind of pushed past them. But this is the esports. Of course. We already came up with that. Trademark, us. These are the low point of the year in terms of maybe sales. I don't know how many. I actually don't know how much Switch sports sold. Probably pretty well, all things considered.
It sold a lot. Sold a fuck ton.
But
I think it's well over 5 million copies.
That's impressive for how unrevolutionary this game is and how poor of the post-launch support it got. But I think that the two of these games, both announced early in the year and released just a few months later, these are one of the most interesting parts of the year. Because a lot of these are established things. It's established properties. We expect them to be getting sequels. We knew Splatoon 3 was coming. We had heard the rumors that they were making a Xenoblade 3. Of course, Bayonetta 3 and Sparks of Hope had been coming for a while. But Nintendo, in what was it, January or February, we're sitting there, we're watching, like, hey, we've got a franchise that we haven't seen in a while, and it's make another sports game? They haven't done that for over a full generation. And it came out, and what we played,
that's not true.
We enjoyed.
It's not true. Club.
Yeah, god damn it. I don't count. I don't count that, and I don't know why. I guess they have been making it, but frankly, I don't think I don't know why I didn't expect them to make
a semantic Samuel,
a sports game on this system, but they did, and they also tried to reinvent what a Nintendo sports game was, but also simultaneously didn't. So I think that this was one of the most interesting parts of the year, but as I said, it was also this like month period where we got both these is certainly the low point.
Yeah, it was a disappointment for me because I love casual Nintendo games. Casual Nintendo games are sort of the first thing I reach for when I'm playing games with Jean or my sister or whatever. And I think it's just hard to reach for one that ends up feeling so similar to what came before.
Yeah.
I don't really have a whole lot more to add than that. I think that Spoko Square is really pretty. I think that the sports games are a good idea. I just think that this was a game that needed a little bit more time.
Yeah.
Because by the time you release golf, brother,
the time that you delay golf,
and then you've released golf. You think I'm gonna go play golf? Shit. Yeah.
Not for resale. Have you heard anyone talk about that game? This golf?
I'm sure you can probably go talk to Bo.
That's true. I'm sure he's playing.
I don't know.
But
yeah, but I don't honestly. I've got like nothing to say about these games because like, what are you supposed to say about them? And I think that's sort of maybe the disappointing thing of if I were to say to somebody, hey, do you like casual Nintendo sports games? Do you remember Wii Sports? And they're like, yeah, I remember it and I like it. I'm like, yeah, then you should probably go buy Nintendo Switch Sports, right?
Yeah.
It's even being sold now as a packet in Japan, which is sensible, I think.
Interesting. Huh.
So it's both of these games are I think emblematic of kind of where modern Nintendo's philosophies are in a lot of ways of we have a need. What is that need? It's for a sports game. Let's go make a sports game exactly the way you expect us to make it, right?
Yeah.
And so I just don't think I don't think much about them, frankly.
Yeah, well, these games and kind of some of their predecessors, like I guess you could say Mario Party Superstars or Mario Tennis Aces, they are what most people would consider the lower pool of first party Switch titles, and I think these two are the perfect example of that because they're both returning to franchises / ideas that had been dormant for a while, and as we were saying, Nintendo recognized that there was a want for these kind of games, and frankly, I didn't expect us to get either of them on the Switch. And I think, but what the games I mentioned and these two games are unfortunately emblematic of is that not every Nintendo team is operating on, in what my mind, the Switch is best at, is continuing the series, is making them bigger and better than they ever have been, reinventing them in these certain ways with Pokemon and Kirby this year. They just did they did the bare minimum, frankly, with both of these games, and
Well,
that's disappointing when you think about how so many of these other franchises had been reinvented. I had never played Mario Strikers, and frankly, I don't know how high a game of this kind could have ever hit for me. But I wanted Mario Strikers to return in full form and be something more, be better, like most franchises have received on Switch, and it just wasn't. So that's why, even though I probably would have liked the game anyway, it's a disappointment on that conceptual level for me.
I think Battle League is interesting because it's made by Next Level Games, who made Luigi's Mansion 3,
Yeah,
which I think is one of the most impressive games on Switch. And
yeah,
so it sort of speaks to me about a larger production and producing scale issue on Nintendo's behalf of basically them saying to Next Level, like, this is the time you have, this is the resources you have,
yeah,
and go make it, right? Because Next Level to me is a team that is capable of doing much more. So it
yeah.
just
Of
makes me
course.
it goes back to what I was saying of like it seems clear to me that they said we want strikers. How
Hmm.
how can we get from point A being no strikers to point B of some strikers as
One
quickly as
strikers.
possible? Yeah.
Yeah,
So I wanted more out of them because these are the sort of games that I love, really, really love.
yeah,
And so when sort of my takeaway from Battle League is, yeah, if you look on the left side of the colon, Mario Strikers, it's great. If you look on the right side of the colon, Battle League, it's disappointing. I get
yeah.
disappointed when I just tell people, "Oh, you should just go play Charged instead," which
Hmm.
is this game and more. So yeah, that was definitely the. I mean, I can't even. I think that's the objective low point. How about
Sure.
put
Yes,
it that
it's
way?
the least controversial low point.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
The behemoth is all that remains, Tucker.
Yep.
Pokemon.
Here
I
we go,
they
boys.
they sold what 30 million copies in this calendar year. These two games
Of
about
games, yes, and
that
whatever amount of
BSP
BDSP.
and
Who knows
yeah,
how well that's still setting?
fucking A, and
Yeah.
all the copies of Legends Arceus they sold after they reported those numbers last. I mean, it's conceivable that the Pokemon Company shipped more than 50 million units of Pokemon
Christ.
between the release of BDSP and now. That is
Yeah. Yeah.
conceivable. Um, Too bad I don't like any of those games.
Yeah. This is, again, as we said at the very beginning, and as we're finally getting to as we close this
Yeah,
up. This is the thing about this year. We're talking about all these franchises,
yeah,
most of these games hitting, but Pokemon did what Pokemon needed, and but it also made Pokemon less consistent than it ever had been. And so when I am looking at this list of games, or when I'm considering 2022, not only for Nintendo, but as a year as a whole, Pokemon is the primary thing that is in my mind. Not only because it's the franchise that I've been with the longest, not only because it's my
yeah.
favorite gaming franchise, and up to this point, the most consistent gaming franchise, but because they did what I feel that most Pokemon players wanted is take a step out of their comfort zone, and
Yeah.
they really did. And for some it paid off, and for some it didn't. But I can't say I was disappointed with either of the games because they're two of
Yeah.
my favorite games I've ever played. And when I'm thinking about 2022 and Nintendo, I'm like, hold on, wait, they put out two of the best Pokemon games of all time, and I don't just mean Scarlet and Violet. I mean Scarlet and Violet and Legends Arceus.
Yeah.
And those are two of my top four favorite Pokemon games of all time. And they really carried the ball farther than I think I ever expected Pokemon to. And it's unfortunate that it has that underbelly, or for you overbelly, I guess, of problems with both these games, because they finally had ambition, and that's really really important and impressive to me.
I can't find the energy anywhere in my body to talk about these games anymore. I think we should just link out to our reviews because we've really got into, I think, that we couldn't get any further into the nitty gritty of what these games, by their own merits or their release schedules, what they mean against each other, any more than we
Yeah,
already have. And I just find myself like,
true.
more than anything, I find myself happy for the people that like them. I'm 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 I'm
Sure.
skeptical about what this sort of means for kind of the franchise as a whole and timelines and what that's,
Yeah.
no pun intended, evolution of the
So am I.
franchise is going to look like from here. But me being in the minority is I'll take it. You guys have your fun. If you want to hear why I don't
Sure.
like these games, you can find that content. You can find it. But
Sure. Well,
yeah,
I didn't necessarily
yeah,
mean to
no,
make
I
this a
know,
mini review, but I do think that
yeah,
it's very important to discuss in the context of what this year was. These were the two best selling games. Splatoon 3 might have
no, I don't think
outpaced
so.
Legends Arceus, but two of the best. Are
Pretty
you sure?
sure.
Okay, well, I'm not. I don't know for sure. But uh, the Pokemon games in Splatoon 3 are the biggest games that Nintendo put out this year. And they put out two fucking Pokemon games this year. And so it's frankly the
Yeah,
core of this year. And Pokemon is usually the core of whatever year it comes out in, not only in terms of sale numbers, but in importance to Nintendo and the industry. And I think that them trying something new here is what I like out of the Switch generation. It's frankly what I feel has been lacking from a lot of these Nintendo franchises like Kirby, but even though I like a lot of the games, to most extent Pokemon. And with Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet, it did show me that Game Freak has
yeah,
something else up their sleeve. They really do. And the fact that they're willing to, continuing the metaphor that I've used in our reviews, knock down the barriers that Pokemon has been established as and say, no, it doesn't have to be the way that it's always been, is really important to the longevity of this franchise because, well, I'm sure the franchise could have stuck around if they were just making more linear route-based games
yeah,
until Oblivion. The fact that they finally knocked down those barriers and in pun actually intended to evolve the franchise is what the Switch
yeah,
has done best with so many of these series, and Pokemon finally got that. I always thought Sword and Shield I thought Sword and Shield must be the evolution of what Pokemon. This is as open as Pokemon is going to get. This is going to be as reinvented as Pokemon is going to get. But no, that was only the third step, half step to what both these games
yeah.
ultimately ended up doing.
They got something else up their sleeve. I'm just hoping they have enough sleeves. Is kind of my feeling. Because
Sure.
I'm just I think that if we had just gotten one and I hadn't liked it, I'd be less cynical about where the
Mm-hmm.
franchise is than us getting two that feel like they have,
Mm.
and not to discredit your enjoyment, but objective problems that would have been ironed out with time. It makes me way more
Yeah, of
cynical
course.
about sort of
Naturally.
where the franchise is going beyond just me not being crazy about sort of the core
Yeah.
design decisions of them. But you're right in the sense that at least it was
Mm-hmm.
something different. And I think that difference does count for a lot.
Yeah.
And so maybe Gen 10 will be the one I like. We'll see.
Yeah. I think that it's important that this happened because
Yeah.
hopefully, God for fucking bid, they learn from their mistakes. And the Pokemon franchise as a whole, with its consistency of the past or the first 7 generations, Gen 8 being a little bit different, was so consistent that
Yeah.
I think that there is a future where not only they are putting out games at a faster clip, which unfortunately makes some of them feel a bit rushed, as we're saying, but that they are given time to learn from mistakes, not because the games are given more time to come out, but because they have more games to iterate on. That's what Pokemon has always been best at, is putting out a lot of fucking games and putting out games in between games
Yeah.
and trying small new things each time and taking a few away, but keeping a few in there. And now they've got open world as a thing that happens. Pokemon are in the overworld, battles happen in the overworld. And now they can learn from that. Now they can realize that, okay, these design decisions don't make a lot of sense. We can try something new here. We can make the open world, now that we know how to make open worlds, a little more interesting here and there. Have a few more interesting things. This is, I think, a maybe slightly more optimistic than what the reality we've been given is, but I think reasonable look into the future of they've done it. They've broken the walls down, and now they have a new foundation
Right.
to begin with. Scarlet and Violet, as you said in like our reveal discussion, are the analog to Red and Blue. This is the reboot that the franchise has,
Yeah.
frankly, always needed, and it now feels more modern. It feels like they're trying something new, and they could easily make a Gen 10 that appeals to you more because they actually know what they're doing now.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't see 50 million copies sold of a game in this state really teaching anybody a lesson.
Yeah.
And we also don't see anything really punitive happening in the way that like stuff happened to Cyberpunk and force CD Projekt Red to like say, let's fix this. I think
Mhm.
for me, the more immediate litmus test as to whether or not I sort of feel charitable towards the future of Pokemon is if Scarlet and Violet get fixed.
Yeah.
If those games get fixed technically,
Sure.
I will be a lot more optimistic about the future of the series. If the next Pokemon game gets announced and Scarlet and Violet are still performing the way that they perform right now, I think that'll probably be where the last of my goodwill for the franchise evaporates. So we'll see. Yeah. I think no matter how you slice it, it's an interesting inflection point for the future of the series.
Absolutely.
There are some things I want to touch on that are not specifically game related this year, though, that I think are important.
I'll let you do it. I'll allow it.
The first is sort of the Switch as a piece of hardware. I think it's interesting to talk about that because I hate to sound like a gatekeeper, but I'm going to. You have to deal with it.
Okay, all right. That's not the phrase I thought would be coming out of your mouth, or hope would be coming out of your mouth.
I think there's a lot of people that talk about Nintendo that just don't know what they're talking about and aren't called out for it.
Sure.
Because
okay, yeah,
the number of people that have talked about how the Switch needs more power because Pokemon runs bad or something like that is sort of just an illustration that you have no fucking clue what you're talking about when you say that. And I think that
I agree.
I think that we're in a situation right now where people just are talking about Nintendo with no real historical understanding of the company and are just swinging for the fence with all kinds of statements that I don't think make sense. It's we're what 6 how many years 5 years almost 6 years into the life of
almost
Switch?
6
and we're getting the usual suspects who, as you'll note, in most cases don't write for Nintendo focused outlets but traditional games outlets saying the Switch is underpowered, we need more power, and that's a fine claim to make in certain perspectives. But what I'm getting kind of tired of is a lot of the games aren't running well, so we need new hardware type of shtick. What I think this year is illustrating kind of where I'm going with this is that we're nowhere near the end of Switch's life. And anybody who is saying that we are speaking without any sort of historical understanding of how Nintendo's operated in the past. It's not me saying you can't make a case for why we need new hardware sooner. But what I'm saying is we got to look at this year, and this is sort of the field I want to lay as we're getting into the discussion. Switch has passed 100 million units sold now. It is a amazing success. It's market saturation.
Yeah, it passed what 115, 116, making it that it sold more than Game Boy.
Yeah, it's
as of like a fucking week ago or something like that.
It's
so it's the third highest selling console that has ever existed behind DS and PS2.
Yeah, its market saturation is incredible. Will we get maybe get a revision? Maybe, probably we'll get some sort of hardware light horsepower revision, sort of like a new 3DS. I would imagine is what we'd get if we get anything. But the games are also selling at a rate that no other publisher's games have sold at ever. And I think it's really
not even their own.
Yeah, I think it's really misinformed to then come and try to make the narrative about 2022 that it was the year that Nintendo's hardware started to fail them. Because that's not true at all. Because Nintendo's success is predicated on them selling software, primarily. Software is where you make all of your money. Because, you're making a couple doubloons off of hardware when you're selling at a profit, but you're making buckets off of it.
Multitude of doubloons.
And
lots of doubloons.
And so the Switch's life cycle will end when it can no longer sell software. That's exactly what happened to the Wii. The Wii sold over 100 million units. Skyward Sword sold 3 million copies. When that happened, it was a clear illustration of the fact that was dead hardware. Because Nintendo's Golden Goose, their software, can no longer sell. And so I just think it's important to impress that is just true. That is just how Nintendo operates. There is so much hardware out there that they can now proliferate software and they are. Tens of millions of copies of several games is unheard of. So the Switch is not going anywhere. I think that there are at least a good 3 years of Switch left. So
sure, we'll see.
I just think it's important to contextualize that piece. And I just think that it's really ridiculous, a lot of the reasons people are giving for needing more powerful hardware. I get wanting more powerful hardware, and I think you can make very compelling cases for why we should have it, but I don't think anyone's making a good case for it this year. as soon as somebody says Pokemon runs poorly
Yeah,
because Switch is underpowered, is the moment I say your argument is invalid. Unfortunately, because that's just not true. Because look at Xenoblade, look
no,
at all these games.
that yeah,
Yeah,
and that's where I did want to
yeah,
draw my argument against, or my counter against that claim,
yeah.
which obviously we've been seeing quite frequently, is that Scarlet and Violet are, as I said in our review, and I was like, well, I'll probably always tout, they're the worst performing first-party Nintendo games that have ever existed. Pretty much bar none. I don't even know almost any that come close to them.
Actually, Star Fox
But
probably
then
runs worse. Actually,
Star Fox 1, sheesh. But you think about Scarlet and Violet and how technically flawed those games are, but you have to pull that into conversation with not just that the Switch's hardware is at the level that it is, but that's only one, maybe one and a half if you count Legends Arceus, though that is nowhere near as technically flawed as Scarlet and Violet are. Versus the 12 games that they put out this year, some of which are some of the best performing and looking games that the system has ever had. I think I had, and some people have claimed that Bayonetta 3 is not performing to the level that they would have hoped from that game.
That's a
But
fair point.
that's maybe the only other one. Three Hopes is the best performing Warriors game we've ever seen. It loads snappy as hell. There's no frame rate dips like there were in Age of Calamity.
Age of Calamity is poor.
Xenoblade 3 runs better and looks better in handheld than Xenoblade 2. Splatoon 3 looks better and runs just as good, if not better, than Splatoon 2. Not Triangle Strategy. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is a gorgeous game and it runs perfectly well because these teams know to adapt to the hardware that they're working on. I mean, even Switch Sports and Battle League, these are games that are underwhelming, but they look great and they run great. There's no frame rate dips in either of those games. It is just the Pokemon cycle that is causing this issue. It's the lack of dev time, it's the lack of polish that makes that game specifically run poorly. It's not anything on the Switch's hardware because most games on Switch's hardware run fine to great, and no one's complaining about the performance in these other games. So people just need to keep the bigger picture in mind.
Yeah.
Most people this year played Pokemon. More people played that game than almost anything else this year.
Yeah.
And so there's more people talking about the performance and Switch's hardware in that context, which unfortunately puts it in a bad light. But also, it's not in a bad light when you think about how great the animations in Sparks of Hope are. That game looks great.
Beautiful
And
game.
the scale and technical fidelity of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. The Pokemon is the exception to the rule. And you're absolutely right about the sales. None of them have slowed down. In fact, all these games have sold better than their predecessors. Forgotten Land's the best-selling Kirby game. I believe Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is the best-selling Xenoblade game. Same with Splatoon 3. Obviously, that game sold faster than literally anything else in history in Japan. And Bayonetta 3, I believe, is the best-selling Bayonetta game. So, it's not the hardware. Obviously, it's not the hardware.
Yeah, I just think that it's I think there's a lot of myopia around the hardware. And people are just not, I think, cutting to the heart of the issue. A couple other things I want to touch on loosely. I just want to shout out the Booster Course Pass in just a vague way, because I enjoyed that this year. Nintendo didn't really do a whole lot with DLC this year, aside from the Booster Course Pass, but I found that to be quite successful. I think Nintendo's done a good job with DLC over the course of the Switch era, and I'm hoping we had a Forgotten Land expansion of some variety. It might end up being a little too late at this point, but Mario Kart's DLC got announced 5 years after the game came out, so you never fucking know.
Jesus Christ, that shakes up everything.
The last thing I actually want to spend any time...
Fighters Pass 3? In 2023?
The last thing I want to spend any time actually...
Sakurai, eat your heart out.
Oh my god. It's the Mario movie. I think...
Oh, Christ.
I think the Mario movie is a really, really important component to Nintendo's year in review, which, of course, we'll end up talking about more next year when it actually releases, but I gotta lay out my case. I think I laid out my case when I did the live stream watching the first trailer, but I gotta lay out my case.
Okay.
Is going to... The Mario movie is going to be the most significant thing that's happened to Nintendo, maybe in their entire run as a games publisher, because this is
interesting.
This is the first time that Mario is going to be proliferated to a different medium in a way that really matters. Don't fucking talk to me at the Super Show. Don't talk to me at the old movie. I don't care. They don't matter. Listen to the words coming out of my mouth. Illumination Entertainment for whatever godforsaken reason, people love their movies. Illumination Entertainment makes billion-dollar films. So they've made 2 of them.
They do.
Made even more. They get really close to $1 billion. Mario is one of, at least the biggest, character, pop culture character that has yet to be mined for film. I've stopped and thought about this. I can't think of another character of Mario's scale that has yet to go to the cinema. And so I just think that people need to be prepared for the Mario movie to be a $1 billion picture or in the ballpark of it. And I think people need to be prepared for what that means for Nintendo's business when they suddenly can make that kind of a wave in a completely different industry. They just announced that that the theme park is opening up in Orlando in March. And the 1-2 hit of that theme park being opened, plus the film coming out, is going to suddenly take Nintendo to a place where they are not sort of emulating Disney and like their appeal or their vaulting strategies or things like this, but where they will literally be competing on a transmedia level in the way that Disney is.
That's a great point. Never thought about that.
And I just think that people are underselling what this is going to mean to Nintendo at its core as a business in a couple months.
Yeah.
And that started this year. So I just want people to be aware of that because I think that's going to be really, really important.
It definitely is a new era.
Yeah.
We don't know what effect this will have, but the fact that they're taking these steps, of course, Super Nintendo World has been open in Japan for a couple years now, or maybe a year. I don't fucking remember.
It keeps getting shut down because of COVID, so we don't really know what its impact is.
Okay, well, sure, and we care a lot less about COVID over here.
Yes.
So as soon as the one in Orlando opens, it's not going to close. But that they're doing these theme parks that have been in the works for a long time, and that they're doing a movie that has been in the works for a long time, and they're proliferating into these other mediums, as you're saying. We don't know what kind of effect this will have on Nintendo's games output, which is what we've known them for the entire history. But I do think there's a distinct possibility that we feel some sort of shift in how many games they make, which games they focus on, how these tie into other property. That's something you're seeing a lot from Sony right now is they're focusing, I think, maybe rightfully so. We haven't really gotten that many examples yet, but that basically every one of their IP that they have is coming out in TV or cinema in some fashion.
Yep.
Games as an art form are changing in their connection to other mediums. And Nintendo has been the strongest holdout against this. And now they're leaning into that. So we might see tie-in games from Nintendo in-house studios. We might see the way that they market their games. We might get some sort of game that not only ties in, but is promoted by a movie. And maybe the release schedule of their games will be shifted around movies being just as big and just as important to them. I mean, you can imagine in a month like April, in 5 years from now, when we're getting a Nintendo movie every 12 to 18 months, that the month that movie comes out, they don't need to put out a game because they're making so much money and so many people are going to see this, that this is the Nintendo thing for this month. Yep. We have no clue how it's going to affect them, but it has to, because it's going to become such a big chunk of their cultural presence that they can rely on it in different ways that are, I'd say for me, equal parts possibly worrying and possibly really exciting, because I think that change is a good thing, especially from Nintendo, that is a company that is set in their ways in some ways, but they're being as modern and forward-looking as they maybe ever have been in this moment with a movie from the biggest animation studio Pixar and in-house Disney make movies that are flops right now. But Illumination has never made a movie that's a flop. And so that kind of synergy is really, really fascinating, and it's going to take them to a new level.
They have a movie that's a hop.
Did Illumination make Hop?
I'm pretty sure Illumination made Hop.
Are you serious?
Don't check me on that. I'm pretty sure Illumination made Hop.
Movies. I mean, I remember that movie. I saw that movie like 2 or 3 times. I mean, it's not a fully animated film.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did that.
You're right. That was the second film they made. Despicable Me and then Hop. and then straight into the Lorax, and then the Minionverse exploded.
Yeah, so I mean, you're totally right. This Nintendo's foray into cinema could have a malign influence on sort of the output on a software level, but we don't know yet. So
Yeah.
I don't have any.
Yeah, and the final thing I
Yeah.
would say about that is it could be a malign, as you say,
Yeah.
because that's a golden dollar word right there. It could have a malign impact
Yeah.
on their games, which is what we know them for. But I think that is really just from the perspective of people who don't know Nintendo as this multimedia corporation. This is going to be something that changes them so radically that future generations of Nintendo fans will be like, you didn't want them to do movies? Are you stupid? Are you crazy? Or like you were worried about what this did to them? And maybe we'll be like, but it's hurting games in this way. But people in the future might be like, yeah, this is better. So I'm really excited to see how this evolves them, and the conversation around what Nintendo can be evolves in the future.
Yeah, I don't know which way to take it. I just know that it is going to matter a lot more than people are giving credit for.
Yeah, absolutely.
People talk about in the Mario movie, and they're like, Chris Pratt is Goofy, or what's up with Donkey Kong, but nobody is zooming out.
Well, that's what the movie's going to. The Donkey Kong movie's going to answer. What's up with Donkey Kong?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's the marketing slogan.
Tucker, what else? Do you want to talk about anything else? You want to?
The final thing that I want to make a statement on here, official statement, BLB statement, is that Nintendo did a good job with Directs this year, I would say. They didn't happen as maybe consistently as they did before the pandemic era, but I think they were used in really smart ways this year. Going into this year, or at least maybe the end of last year, or maybe it was 2020, I don't even remember when you said something like this, but you didn't want them to do Directs, and you predicted that they wouldn't be returning to the Direct format. And obviously, that didn't happen. That? Yes, you did. You most certainly did.
I remember saying I didn't want them to, but I made that prediction as a
You were like, yeah, no, they've figured out ways to promote their games without Directs.
I'm plugging in my computer. You keep talking.
But I think that Directs this year are something I'm really happy to see return in the form and fashion that they did, because they've been great moments for me. They've been great moments for our channel for the two of us to like recenter on Nintendo, talk about the future, talk about what's coming out. And it's where we got so many of our surprises this year. We knew a lot of these games were coming, but it was Directs that really gave us the surprises. No, we didn't know Switch Sports and Battle League were happening, then boom, suddenly they're happening and they're fucking out. And the fact that we got a new Fire Emblem game and Pikmin 4 announced for next year, like for me really proves, and they were cultural moments, at least for us and on the internet, proves to me that Directs are important, great for Nintendo and their culture, and here to stay. Because I think that they've only gotten better since the pandemic started. I don't think they're quite at the highs of when they were really active in 2018 and 19, but I was really pleased with the way they used Directs this year and the cadence and pacing of them.
I thought you didn't like the Directs this year. Don't we have videos of you saying that they're worst Directs?
No, but I'm very happy that they happened. I think that some of the pacing within them was an issue for me. But again, when it comes to, we've had this conversation a lot of times, when it comes to presentations from game companies, retrospectively, I think they're all good. It's just in the moment, like sometimes like, blah, a little whiny baby. Sure. But when a presentation has Pikmin 4 and Fire Emblem, it's like, the fuck am I complaining about? I'm going to play two of these games that I'm so ungodly excited for next year. And I got to have this great moment reacting to them with my friends and the internet because of this format.
And Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe. Don't forget that one.
And Cereza and the Lost Demon. It's happening. Bayonetta Origins. Get hyped.
I think Nintendo aptly marketed to me this year. I agree with you.
Sure. Fair. And that's better than you felt in the past year, so.
The Pikmin 4 trailer was all I needed. To be honest with you, I don't remember anything else from any of these directs this year. As you're saying, like, oh yeah, that's where the booster course pass was. Yeah, I remember that. But like, in one ear, out the other for the most part from the directs. But I'm glad that they served the purpose you needed them to serve for you. Because you are more of the direct understander than I am. So
sure.
Ultimately, I defer most on that point to you.
They talk directly to me and indirectly to you.
Yes. Yeah, 2023 looks pretty good. I think we had a pretty good lineup. I think as we're sort of winding down this video and getting the getting the H out of here, we can look at the games that are coming next year. It's
Hmm.
funny. As of the time of recording, we are less than 1 month away from Fire Emblem Engage.
It's true.
You ever think about that?
Yeah, I do. I actually
Um,
have frequently recently.
this is actually an interesting thing. I'm gonna have to figure out. Yeah. Okay.
What?
Fire Emblem Engage. Fire Emblem
Yeah.
Engage.
Now,
It
here's the
feels
thing
like
about.
that feels like a game that's gonna feels like a game that's coming out in like a year's time, but it's out in
It's
like
true.
3.5 weeks. Is that
Yeah, well, and I
interesting?
think that is because of the different pacing they took to announcing and releasing and revealing this game. Because Fire Emblem Three Houses was announced that they were making a Switch Fire Emblem game like 3 years before that happened, and then the first trailer was like a year after that, so there was like a full 2.5 years of like marketing for that. But Engage is a very quick turnaround, but it's not a quick turnaround in terms of production. This game has been in the works for a long time, the longest of any
Yeah.
mainline modern Fire Emblem game. And I think that for especially the big games that we have announced, they signal to me what the best games of this year did is that Nintendo knows when the games are right to take their time with it. Pikmin 4, obviously,
Yeah.
ungodly, notoriously, has been in development for, I
It's
think, like,
almost
what,
done.
three
Some,
generations of humans? Like 95 years, something like that?
some close to
And
that.
Tears of the Kingdom, longer than we ever thought or hoped it would be.
Hmm.
And same with Fire Emblem Engage, like I said, the longest. So I'm excited for these games to be the pillars of next year. I think that all three of them look good and are exciting on
Yeah.
different levels. And I hope that they all hit for me because I kind of have this thought process going into any year. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is the greatest year of video games that's ever happened. Look at this huge lineup. And then some come out, some are delayed, some don't hit. And of course, that's going to happen next
Yeah.
year. And I'm sort of like learned to prepare myself a little more clearly for that. But with
Yeah.
at least those three big games that we have announced, plus Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe and Bayonetta Origins, Erased and the Lost Demon, I'm already pretty excited about next year, especially because that's only the first half of the year.
Yeah, we got obviously we don't have a sort of even a window for Pikmin 4, but I would presume that
Yeah.
Pikmin 4 is probably in the first half of the year. We
Mm-hmm.
basically know everything Nintendo's doing through May.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that puts us in an interesting position where there's really no rush for there to be a big showcase with all kinds of shit
Yeah.
happening. But there's also enough information to where we're not really going to feel like we're in the dark
True.
as we hit Fire Emblem and Kirby and then Bayonetta and then Pikmin and Mario movie and Zelda. I mean, that's a I mean,
It's a
you're not that far
tall
off
drink of water.
you're not that far off from a full like year run of show with
Yeah.
that stuff right there. You just throw a couple more games
Yeah.
in. So we'll see. We will certainly see, Tucker, unless the world ends. You know,
It's great. It's always an option.